My parents refused to pay for my college and secretly spent my $60,000 fund on my brother's wedding. But what happened next left them begging me for mercy. I'm a 21-year-old, and my family situation went from kind of crappy to nuclear meltdown in the span of a few months. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags, but when you're in the middle of it, not so much. It all started the summer after high school graduation. I was actually pretty excited about starting university in the fall. I'd picked a place close to home because, let's be real, university is expensive as hell, and commuting seemed like the smart move. I had some money saved up from my part-time job at this local garage where I'd been working on cars. I've always been into that stuff, and I figured with a little help from my parents, I'd be able to make it work. Yeah, about that help part. One night in July, my parents sat me down at our kitchen table. I thought it was going to be one of those standard "we're so proud of you" talks parents give after graduation. Instead, I got hit with what I now call the "you're an adult now" speech. "Jake," my mom started, folding her hands on the table, all serious like, "you're an adult now, and your father, and I think it's time you start taking responsibility for yourself." Dad nodded along. "We've decided we won't be paying for your university expenses. Not tuition, not books, not gas for commuting. Not because we don't want to, but because it's important you learn the value of money." I just sat there, blinking, thinking this had to be some kind of weird joke. But nope, they were dead serious. Then my dad, who's usually the quiet one, dropped another bomb. "And if you want to continue living here, you'll need to start paying rent, plus your own groceries. It's only fair." Fair? I was literally sitting in the same kitchen where they still had my height markers penciled on the wall from when I was a kid. I was still sleeping in my childhood bedroom with model cars I built when I was 12 displayed on the shelves, and now they wanted me to pay rent? For some context, my parents aren't struggling for cash. My mom's a high school English teacher, and my dad's an accountant at a local firm. They live in a decent 3-bedroom house in an okay neighborhood. They make ends meet, but there's not a ton left over. Still, they definitely weren't asking for rent because they desperately needed the money. This was clearly some twisted life lesson they decided I needed to learn. One they never bothered teaching Tyler. Meanwhile, my older brother Tyler, 25, male, has always been the golden child of the family. Football star in high school. Good-looking, charismatic, the whole package. Everyone loves Tyler, especially my parents, who have never held him to the same standards as me. The thing about Tyler though, is he's useless when it comes to actual adult responsibilities. Since graduating college, which my parents fully paid for, by the way, he's bounced between like 6 different jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a few months because his boss was unbearable or the job was beneath him or whatever excuse he came up with. But there he was, living in our parents' basement rent-free whenever he was between apartments, getting constant handouts whenever he needed the latest iPhone or wanted to take his girlfriend Melissa, 24, female, on some fancy date. I should have stood up for myself that night at the kitchen table, should have pointed out the massive double standard, should have asked why Tyler got everything handed to him while I got slapped with rent, but I didn't want to cause a scene, didn't want to be the difficult one, so I just nodded and said I'd figure it out. And figure it out I did, even though it nearly killed me. The next few weeks were a blur of panic and calculations. Rent wasn't outrageous. I think they set it at $400 a month, which was way less than I'd pay for an actual apartment in our area, but when you add in tuition, books, gas, groceries, phone bill, car insurance, it all added up so damn fast. I started picking up every extra shift I could at the garage. The owner was a decent guy who knew I was trying to pay for school, so he gave me first dibs on overtime. I was changing oil, rotating tires, fixing brakes, basic stuff, but it paid the bills, sort of. Moving out crossed my mind about 1,000 times. I even went apartment hunting with a buddy who was also starting at the uni, but rent in our area is completely insane. The cheapest one-bedroom we found was still $1,200 a month, not including utilities. Even with a roommate, there was no way I could swing that and pay for school. So I made a deal with myself. I'd tough it out at home, keep my head down, save every penny I could, and the second I had enough money, I'd be gone. That became my driving force through all the crap that followed, the knowledge that someday I'd be free of them. Living at home quickly became a special kind of torture. My parents were relentless about the rent, sending me reminder texts 3 days before it was due every month, even though I was never late. Mom would literally leave post-it notes on my door, "Rent due Friday," like I could somehow forget the massive drain on my bank account. And all the while, they kept treating Tyler like he hung the damn moon. This one time, he maxed out his credit card buying Melissa some fancy necklace for their anniversary, plus a bunch of designer clothes for himself. Instead of telling him to get his act together, my parents just paid it off. I'm talking $3,000+ of debt, just wiped clean. That same week, I asked if they could maybe help me with my calculus textbook that cost $180. Jake, my mom said, you need to learn how to budget better. Tyler has different expenses than you. Different expenses? Like what? The cost of being the favorite child? Tyler wasn't exactly helping matters. He's not evil or anything, just completely oblivious to his privilege and kind of a jerk about it. He'd constantly brag about the stuff our parents bought him, completely unaware that I was struggling to keep my head above water. One night, I came home after a 12-hour shift at the garage, completely dead on my feet, covered in grease and sweat. Tyler was sprawled on the couch, playing some game on a brand new PS5. Dude, check it out, he said without looking up. Mom and Dad got this for me yesterday. The graphics are insane. You should get one. I just stood there, staring at him, thinking about how I just spent the last 12 hours under cars to make enough money to pay for one of my textbooks. Yeah, I finally said. Maybe when I don't have to pay rent. He just shrugged and went back to his game, the comment completely bouncing off him. That was Tyler in a nutshell, totally incapable of recognizing his own privilege or anyone else's struggles. I'd always heard people talk about how university was supposed to be this amazing time in your life. Freedom, parties, making lifelong friends, finding yourself, or whatever. For me, it was just survival mode from day one. My daily routine was brutal, up at 6 a.m., out the door by 7, at university for morning classes until noon, then straight to the garage to work until 8 or 9 p.m. I'd get home, shovel some food in my face, try to do homework until my eyes wouldn't stay open anymore, then crash for a few hours before doing it all over again. Weekends weren't any better. That's when I'd catch up on assignments I couldn't finish during the week, or pick up extra shifts at the garage. I never went to parties, never joined any campus clubs, never did any of the normal university kid stuff. I just worked and studied and worked. The garage job was decent most days. I liked working with my hands, and I was pretty good at it. The owner started teaching me more advanced stuff when he saw I had a knack for it, especially with older cars. But the physical toll was rough, always bent over engines, crawling under vehicles, lifting heavy parts. My back constantly hurt, and my hands were perpetually stained with grease that never seemed to completely wash off, no matter how hard I scrubbed. Then I'd come home and try to focus on differential equations, or economic theory with eyes that could barely stay open. There were nights I fell asleep at my desk, only waking up when my alarm screamed at me the next morning. My parents saw all of this. They watched me drag myself through the door late at night, exhausted and grimy. They saw the stack of textbooks I was working through. They knew how hard I was pushing myself. And their response? Don't forget the rent's due Friday. Or, we noticed the electricity bill went up this month. Are you leaving your lights on when you're not in your room? Meanwhile, Tyler floated through life without a care in the world. He'd score these random jobs that would last a few months. Retail at the mall, bartending, sales at a cell phone store, before quitting for some stupid reason. But somehow, he always had cash for going out with his friends, or buying stuff for Melissa. I'd come home from a brutal shift to find him playing video games in the middle of the day, and Mom would be asking him if he wanted anything special for dinner. The contrast was so stark it was almost laughable. The financial stress was unreal. Even with all the hours I was working, I was constantly broke. There were weeks I'd open my bank app and just stare at the balance, $37.42, wondering how I was going to stretch that until my next paycheck. One particularly bad month, I realized I wouldn't have enough for both rent and my portion of the car insurance. I swallowed my pride and asked Mom if she could maybe cover my groceries for that week to help me out. She looked at me like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. Jake, she said slowly, like she was talking to a 5-year-old, we're already doing so much for you by letting you stay here. Letting me stay here? I was paying to stay there in their house, my childhood home. The mental gymnastics she was doing to make me the burden and Tyler the blessing was Olympic level. I locked myself in my room that night and seriously considered just dropping out. What was the point of killing myself for a degree when the deck was so clearly stacked against me? But quitting would just prove them right, that I couldn't hack it, that I needed handouts like Tyler. So I pushed through, finishing the semester with decent but not great grades. Every night as I fell into bed, I'd remind myself, this isn't forever. Someday I'll be free of all of this. I just have to survive until then. Things took an even weirder turn when Tyler announced he was getting engaged to Melissa. They'd been dating for about 2 years, and suddenly they were planning this massive wedding like they were royalty or something. Melissa had always given off major bridezilla vibes, even before she had a ring. She was constantly posting on Instagram about dream weddings and creating elaborate Pinterest boards. But now it was official. She wanted the fairy tale wedding with all the bells and whistles. And who was going to pay for this extravaganza? You guessed it. I started noticing my parents and Tyler huddled around the kitchen table, looking at wedding venues online or flipping through catering menus. Mom was constantly on the phone with vendors, discussing flower arrangements and lighting options like she was planning an inauguration. One night, I overheard them talking about deposits. Tyler was stressing about some payment, and Mom just patted his hand and said, "Don't worry about the money, sweetie. Dad and I will make it work. This is your special day." Meanwhile, that same week, my car needed an oil change desperately, and I was so broke I couldn't even afford the $50 to do it myself with supplies from the auto parts store. When I asked if they could loan me the money until my next paycheck, Dad said, "Money's tight right now, Jake. You need to plan better for these kinds of expenses." Tight for a $50 loan that I was going to pay back in a week, but not too tight for whatever ridiculous deposit they were putting down on Tyler's wedding venue. A few days later, Tyler came home practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. He'd just been to see the venue with Mom and Melissa, some fancy country club with immaculate grounds and a ballroom. He showed me pictures on his phone, swiping through shots of chandeliers and marble floors and some giant fountain with the club's initials. "Pretty sick, right?" he said, grinning. "Got the whole place reserved for October." I scrolled through the photos, trying to keep my face neutral. "Looks expensive," I finally said. "How are you affording this?" "Didn't realize part-time cell phone sales came with a wedding planner." Tyler just laughed and took his phone back. "Mom and Dad are helping out. They said every guy deserves his dream wedding day. Every guy deserves his dream wedding. But apparently not every son deserves help with university." The double standard was so blatant it made my head spin. The wedding planning only got more insane as the months went on. Melissa wanted everything top of the line. Designer dress, premium catering with a 5-course meal, open bar with signature cocktails, photo booth, live band, the works. I actually knew she was a gold digger from the start, but of course, didn't say anything. And my parents were just funding all of it, no questions asked. Tyler started spending more time at our house, sitting with Mom at the kitchen table, going through guest lists or browsing wedding websites while I tried to study at the other end. It was like living in some kind of bizarre alternate reality where my brother was being rewarded for doing absolutely nothing while I was being punished for trying to better myself. One night, I was grabbing a snack from the kitchen when I overheard Dad and Tyler talking in the living room. They were discussing honeymoon options. "The resort in Cancun looks really nice," Dad was saying, looking at something on his laptop. "It's a bit more than we budgeted for the honeymoon, but it's only a few thousand extra." A few thousand extra, just like that. Where the hell were they getting all this money? My parents made decent salaries, but not throw a few extra thousand at a honeymoon kind of money. And if they had this much cash sitting around, why was I surviving on ramen 4 nights a week and picking up every disgusting oil change shift nobody wanted just to keep my electricity on? I went back to my room that night and just sat on my bed, trying to process it all. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Here I was, doing exactly what my parents claimed they wanted me to do, being responsible, working hard, paying my way, and I was struggling just to survive. Meanwhile, Tyler was being handed everything on a silver platter for what exactly? Being born first? Being the favorite? It just didn't make any sense. There had to be something I wasn't seeing, some bigger picture I was missing. Little did I know, I was about to get the whole ugly truth, and it was worse than anything I could have imagined. I'd been bottling up all this frustration and anger for almost 2 years, never really talked to anyone about it because, well, what was the point? My friends were dealing with their own university struggles, and bringing it up to my parents was like talking to a brick wall. They'd made it clear where their priorities lay, and it wasn't with me. But one night, after a particularly brutal week where I'd worked a 60-hour shift at the garage while battling a nasty cold only to come home and find my parents had bought Tyler and Melissa matching Apple Watches as an engagement present, I just broke. I waited until I was alone in my room, then called my Grandpa Joe. Grandpa Joe is my dad's father, and he's always been the coolest guy I know. He owned this classic car restoration shop for about 40 years before he retired. Growing up, I spent every weekend I could at his shop, learning how to sand down body panels, mix paint colors perfectly, and restore these beautiful old machines to their former glory. He was patient with me, never getting annoyed when I'd ask a million questions or mess something up. He never judged me or pushed me to be something I wasn't. He just let me be me. We hadn't talked much since he retired a few years back. He and Grandma had been traveling around the country in their vintage Airstream, visiting national parks and car shows. They'd only recently settled back into their old house, deciding they wanted to spend more time with family. I probably should have reached out earlier, but I didn't want to burden him with my problems. He was enjoying his retirement, finally getting to do all the things he'd put off while building his business. But that night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I needed someone who would actually listen. When he picked up the phone, I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in forever. "Hey kiddo," he said, his voice gruff but warm. "Long time, no talk. What's going on with you?" And I just let it all out. Everything. How I'd been working myself to the bone while my parents made me pay rent, how they refused to help with my education but were throwing this lavish wedding for Tyler. How they constantly made me feel like a burden while treating Tyler like he hung the moon. I told him about the car maintenance I couldn't afford, the textbooks I had to buy secondhand with missing pages, the nights I'd gone to bed hungry because I couldn't afford groceries that week. He listened quietly, but as I talked about the latest wedding expenses, the honeymoon in Cancun, the designer dress for Melissa, I heard him make this weird noise, like he just figured something out. "Jake," he interrupted me, his voice suddenly serious. "Didn't your parents use the money I gave them for your education?" I stopped mid-sentence. "What money?" There was a long, heavy pause on the line. When Grandpa spoke again, his voice had changed. It wasn't angry, but there was a sharpness to it that I'd rarely heard before. "When you were 14, I set aside $60,000 for your university fund. I gave it to your parents to put in a special account for you. It was supposed to cover your tuition and expenses when you started school. Are you telling me they never mentioned this to you?" I felt like someone had just punched me in the gut. The world seemed to tilt sideways for a second as my brain tried to process what I was hearing. "What? They never said anything," I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not a word. I've been paying for everything myself, all of it, working myself half to death to cover tuition while they—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. The betrayal was too raw, too fresh. Grandpa let out this heavy sigh. "Jake, that money was for you. I gave it to them because I wanted to make sure you had a solid start in life. I didn't want you to have to struggle through school like I did. If I'd known this is what they were doing." It took me a minute to fully process what he was saying. All this time, I'd been told that my parents couldn't afford to help me with school, that they wanted me to learn independence and understand the value of money. But now I was finding out they'd had $60,000 specifically meant for my education, and they hadn't bothered to tell me about it. $60,000 that would have covered my entire community university tuition with plenty left over for books, supplies, even transferring to a 4-year school later. I could have focused on my studies instead of working myself to exhaustion. I could have had a normal university experience instead of this endless grind. "They lied to me," Grandpa said, his voice now hard with anger. "They lied to you. That money was yours, not theirs, not Tyler's, yours." I couldn't speak. Part of me wanted to scream to break something, but mostly I just felt numb. "What do you think they did with it?" I finally asked, barely able to get the words out. "I don't know," Grandpa said, "but I'm going to find out. And Jake, this isn't just morally wrong. What they've done might be illegal. That money was in a designated university fund with your name on it. If they've been taking it out for other purposes, especially bit by bit, claiming emergencies to avoid penalties, well, let's just say I have a friend who's a damn good lawyer." Grandpa had always been the laid-back, easygoing type, but now he sounded ready for war. "Jake," he added, his voice softening a little, "you're not alone in this anymore. I'll handle it. You just focus on your studies for now, okay?" Hearing him say that made something inside me break open. For years I'd been carrying everything on my own, thinking no one cared or even noticed, but now finally someone was in my corner, someone believed me, someone was going to fight for me. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind kept circling back to all the times I'd asked for just a little assistance, help with a textbook, covering groceries for a week, and they brushed me off. All the times Mom told me I needed to budget better while they were out buying Tyler a new game console. And all along they had $60,000 sitting in their pocket that could have changed everything for me. The more I thought about it, the more my numbness gave way to rage. But beneath the anger, there was also a tiny spark of something else. Hope. For the first time in years, I wasn't fighting this battle alone. Grandpa was on my side, and from the sound of it, he wasn't going to let this go. Something was finally going to change. 4 days after my call with Grandpa, my phone lit up with his name. I was in the middle of a shift at the garage but stepped outside to answer. "I've been looking into this, Jake," he said without preamble, his voice tight, controlled, but I could hear the anger simmering underneath. "Your mother's been making withdrawals from your university fund for the past 3 years, small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there, always marked as family emergency, then bigger chunks when Tyler and Melissa got engaged. I'm coming over tonight to talk to your parents and I want you there too." My stomach dropped. "I don't know, Grandpa. You need to be there, son," he said firmly. "This is your future they stole." I agreed, even though the thought of the confrontation made me feel sick. I finished my shift in a daze, my mind racing through all the possible ways this could go down. None of them seemed good. That night, Grandpa showed up at our house at 7 p.m. sharp. I met him outside and we walked to the door together. He gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze before ringing the bell. Mom answered, her expression shifting from confusion to unease when she saw us both standing there. "Joe, Jake, What's going on? We need to talk, Grandpa said, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard it before, about Jake's university fund. The color drained from Mom's face so fast. I don't know what you're... Save it, Linda. Grandpa cut her off. I've seen the bank statements. Dad appeared behind her, looking between us with growing alarm. Dad, what's this about? Let us in, Robert, Grandpa said, unless you want to have this conversation on the front porch where all your neighbors can hear. They let us into the living room. Tyler was sprawled on the couch, playing some game on his phone. He barely looked up when we walked in. Turn that off, Grandpa barked at him. This concerns you too. Tyler rolled his eyes but put down his phone. What's the big deal? Grandpa pulled out a folder and slapped it on the coffee table. The big deal is that your parents have been stealing from your brother for years. That $60,000 I gave them when Jake was 14, the money that was supposed to be for his education, they've been using it to fund your wedding and bail you out of trouble. Tyler looked confused, then turned to our parents. What's he talking about? My dad shifted uncomfortably. Dad, you don't understand. We've had expenses. Don't give me that crap, Robert, Grandpa snapped. I've got all the withdrawal records right here. Family emergency, my ass. Unless you consider buying Tyler a PlayStation 5 in emergency or putting down deposits on wedding venues or that trip to Cancun you've been planning. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to deny it, to have some explanation that would make this all make sense. But they just sat there, looking as guilty as hell. Is it true? I asked, my voice barely steady. You had money for my university this whole time while I've been killing myself working and taking out loans? Mom couldn't even look at me. Dad just stared at the floor. Answer him, Grandpa demanded. Dad finally looked up. We were going to pay it back, he said weakly. Tyler needed help with the wedding and what about what Jake needed? Grandpa interrupted. He's been working himself to the bone while you make him pay rent in his own home. It's not that simple. Mom finally spoke up. Tyler isn't as independent as Jake. He needs more support. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So because I'm responsible, I get punished, while Tyler gets rewarded for being a screw-up? Tyler jumped up from the couch. Hey, watch it. Not everyone wants to waste their life under a car, grease monkey. Better than being a leech. I shot back. Here's what's going to happen. Grandpa cut us off, his voice firm. You're going to pay back every cent of that $60,000 within 30 days, or I'm not only cutting you out of the will, I'm pressing charges for financial fraud. That money was in a designated university fund with Jake's name on it. What you've been doing is illegal. You wouldn't, Mom gasped. That means we're going to have to cancel the wedding. We don't have that money. Try me, Grandpa said. I've already talked to my lawyer. Those withdrawals you marked as emergencies to avoid the early withdrawal penalties? That's fraud, Linda. And you, of all people, should know better. Being a teacher who should set an example. Wait, what? Tyler suddenly looked panicked, jumping up from the couch. Cancel my wedding? You can't be serious. Melissa will freak out. We've already sent the invitations. The room went dead silent for a moment. Then Dad suddenly stood up, his face flushed with anger. He turned to me. This is your fault. You went behind our backs to your grandfather instead of talking to us like a man. I tried talking to you for years, I said. Every time I asked for help with school, you shut me down. You told me to be responsible, to stand on my own feet, while the whole time you were using my money to spoil him. We are your parents, Dad yelled, stepping closer to me. We decide what's best for this family, not you, not him. He jabbed a finger toward Grandpa. Best for the family? I laughed. You mean best for Tyler? That's when Dad lost it. His hand shot out and slapped me hard across the face, the sound cracking through the room like a gunshot. Everyone froze. My cheek burned, but not as much as the rage burning in my chest. I stood my ground, staring him down, daring him to do it again. Grandpa stepped between us, his body tense like he was ready to throw a punch of his own. You just made a big mistake, Robert, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Mom was crying now, these pathetic little sobs that made me feel nothing. Tyler was still on the couch, actually smirking, like he was enjoying seeing me get put in my place. That smile told me everything I needed to know about where his loyalties lay. Jake's coming home with me tonight, Grandpa said, breaking the silence. And you've got 30 days to get that money back, every last penny. I didn't wait for them to respond. I went straight to my room, grabbed a duffel bag, and started throwing in clothes, my laptop, and a few other essentials. I could get the rest of my stuff later. Right now, I just needed to get out of that house before I did something I'd regret. When I came back to the living room with my bag, Dad had disappeared into the kitchen. I could hear cabinets slamming. Mom was still crying on the couch. Tyler stood in the hallway, blocking my path. Nice job ruining everything, he hissed, his face twisted with anger. You always have to make everything about you, don't you? I just pushed past him. Enjoy your backyard wedding. Grandpa was waiting for me by the door. You ready, son? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As we walked out to his truck, I could hear Mom calling after me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I did, I might have lost it completely. When we arrived, Grandpa showed me to the spare room. A simple space with a comfortable bed and a window that overlooked his detached garage where he still kept his favorite car projects. It already felt more like home than my parents' house ever had. That night, I slept better than I had in years, even with all the chaos swirling around me. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe, protected, like I wasn't fighting the whole world alone anymore. After that day, my parents' whole wedding operation fell apart like a house of cards. They'd been cruising along like nothing was wrong, but Grandpa wasn't playing around, and when they realized he wasn't bluffing about the legal consequences, the panic set in. The fallout hit 1 week before the wedding. Suddenly, the fancy country club venue was too expensive, the premium catering needed to be scaled back, and the honeymoon to Cancun was canceled entirely. Tyler was freaking out. Then he called me. I almost didn't pick up but decided I wanted to hear whatever excuse he was going to come up with. Are you happy now? He snapped as soon as I answered. You've ruined everything. Mom and Dad just told me they have to cancel the venue, the caterer, practically everything for the wedding. Not my fault they stole my money to fund your big day, I shot back. Look, bro. His voice suddenly changed. I didn't know about any college fund, I swear to God. If I'd known they were using your money, I would have said something. Yeah, right. I'm sure as hell he knew all along. If not, he's the one who suggested that brilliant idea because he's not exactly that stupid. The wedding's next week, man. Melissa's already freaking out. Her family's flying in from Chicago. Her grandparents booked non-refundable tickets. He was practically begging now. Can't you just let them pay Grandpa back after? Please, I'll owe you big time. The audacity was almost impressive. Not my problem, I said coldly. You want a wedding? Fine, you get a backyard barbecue and a Bluetooth speaker. If Mom and Dad repay the full $60,000, I'll pay for something modest myself, but it comes out of my standards, not theirs. He lost it, started yelling about how I was ruining the most important day of his life, how Melissa's family would think they were trash, how I was just jealous because he was happy and I wasn't. Are you done? I asked when he finally paused for breath. Fuck you, he spat and hung up. And just like that, the wedding didn't happen. At least not the fancy country club version they'd planned. Melissa was so pissed when she found out they'd have to scale back to a backyard ceremony that she called everything off. Apparently, she'd been bragging to all her friends about her perfect fairy tale wedding, and the thought of getting married in someone's backyard with a grocery store cake was too much for her to handle. She broke up with Tyler 3 days before what would have been their wedding day. Most of the guests canceled, and Tyler was absolutely furious. He blamed me for everything, said I'd ruined his life because I was petty and jealous. Meanwhile, I was doing pretty well at Grandpa's place. He'd let me help out in his garage, where he still restored classic cars as a hobby. Working on those beautiful old machines was so much more satisfying than the everyday repairs I'd been doing before. He also started teaching me the finer points of restoration, how to match original paint colors exactly, how to refurbish interior upholstery, how to track down rare parts. It was like being a kid again, spending weekends at his shop. Except now, I was actually good at it. My parents tried reaching out a few times, but their messages were always about how I needed to stop this nonsense and come home so we could be a family again. Not once did they actually apologize for what they'd done. It was always about how I was tearing the family apart, never about how they'd betrayed me. I deleted their texts without replying. But Tyler wasn't done. A few weeks after the wedding disaster, Tyler showed up at Grandpa's place, completely wasted. I was in the garage, working on this gorgeous 1967 Mustang that a client had brought in. Grandpa trusted me enough to let me handle it myself while he went to get parts. Tyler staggered in, reeking of booze. You ruined my whole life, he slurred, pointing at me. Melissa's gone because of you. Tyler, go home, I said, turning back to the car. You're drunk. Don't ignore me, he shouted, grabbing my shoulder. You think you're so much better than me now, working with Grandpa on his precious cars? I pushed his hand off. Tyler, seriously, get out of here before you do something stupid. But he was too far gone. He looked at the Mustang, then back at me, and I saw something ugly cross his face. Nice car, he said, picking up my keys from the workbench. Let's see how it drives. Before I could stop him, he jumped in the driver's seat and started the engine. I ran after him, but he was already backing out of the garage. Tyler, stop! That's a client's car. He just flipped me off and peeled out of the driveway. I called Grandpa, in a panic, then the police. They found Tyler about an hour later. He'd sideswiped a parked car and scratched the hell out of the Mustang's passenger side before abandoning it in a mall parking lot. I pressed charges. I didn't want to, but that car was worth over $100,000 after restoration, and the damage Tyler did cost thousands to fix, plus Grandpa said it was